The phone was already ringing in the back pocket of contestant Anthony Russo's jeans when Steve Harvey asked the first fast money question. Anthony, 36, a single father of 3 from Cleveland, ignored it. It rang a second time, a third. Anthony kept his eyes on Steve and his hand on the buzzer. On the fourth ring, a producer in the control booth looked at the monitor, saw the incoming number, and went completely still. The number was the direct line to pediatric ICU at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital in Cleveland, Ohio. Anthony's 7-year-old son, Dominic, had been admitted for a bone marrow transplant 11 days earlier. The hospital had strict rules about who called that number and when. The producer dropped her headset and ran out of the booth. She burst through the side curtain, waved across the studio at Steve Harvey, and mouthed 2 words the cameras caught on the wide shot. His son. Steve Harvey turned his head slowly toward Anthony. His mouth opened. And then Steve Harvey did something he had never done in 15 years of Family Feud. He walked off the host mark, crossed the stage in 4 long strides, reached into Anthony's back pocket, pulled out the ringing phone, and answered it himself. It was October 3, 2024, at Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta, 11:13 in the morning. The Russo family of Cleveland, Ohio, stood on the blue side of the stage with 4 people, not 5. Anthony, 36, in a charcoal button-down his sister had bought him for the taping, stood at the far left. Beside him stood his younger sister Gianna, 31, a dental hygienist who had raised Anthony's 2 younger children for 3 weeks at a stretch, while Anthony slept in a vinyl recliner beside Dominic's hospital bed. Beside Gianna stood Anthony's father, Vincent Russo, 64, a retired firefighter with a white mustache and shoulders that had carried coffins at too many funerals. Beside Vincent stood Anthony's best friend since the 6th grade, a pipefitter named Tommy Marino, who had taken 3 days of unpaid leave to be there. The 5th spot, where Anthony's wife Maria should have been standing, was empty. Maria Russo had been killed by a drunk driver on the Inner Belt Bridge in Cleveland on March 11, 2022. She had been 33 years old. Dominic, their oldest, had been 5 at the time. The twins, Gabriel and Lucia, had been 2. On the red side stood the Johansson family of Minneapolis, 5 siblings in matching red polos, led by a hospice social worker named Birgit, who had the kindest eyes in the building. The lights warmed. Anthony's phone had been on silent the entire morning, or so he thought. He had set it to silent in the green room at 9:40. He had not realized, because he had been running on 3 hours of sleep for 11 straight days, that he had also turned on an emergency contact override for one specific number, the direct line to the PICU at Rainbow Babies. A hospital social worker had walked him through the setting the night Dominic was admitted. "Anthony, any call from this number will go through even on silent. We call this number only when a parent needs to be reached immediately." Anthony had forgotten. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. What nobody knew, not the Johanssons, not the audience, not Steve Harvey himself, was that Dominic Russo, 7 years old, had been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia on February 14, 2024, and had spent the last 7.5 months of his life fighting a disease that had killed his mother's younger brother 30 years earlier in the same hospital. The bone marrow match had come at last on September 18th from an anonymous donor in Germany. The transplant had been performed on September 22nd. Anthony had been told, the day of the transplant, that the first 30 days would be the most dangerous of Dominic's life. Anthony had been told, 2 days before he flew to Atlanta, that Dominic was stable enough for him to leave for a 48-hour taping. Anthony had not wanted to go, Gianna had begged him. Gianna had said, "Anthony, you have not slept, you have not eaten, you have been in that hospital chair for 2 months. You are about to fall apart, and then the three of them have nobody. You are going to Atlanta. You are going to win. You are coming back. That is how this works." The reason they needed the money was not the transplant. The transplant itself was covered by insurance, 68%. It was everything else. The system failure had begun the day after the diagnosis. Anthony's health insurance, through his job as a line cook at a downtown Cleveland restaurant, covered inpatient chemotherapy, but not the at-home anti-rejection medications Dominic would need for a minimum of 2 years post-transplant. The insurance company had denied the specific combination protocol Dr. Rakesh Menon had recommended in a single-page letter dated March 18, citing that the protocol was deemed experimental for pediatric patients under age 10. Dr. Menon appealed. The appeal was denied on April 24th. A second appeal, filed through the hospital patient advocate, was denied on May 29 on a paperwork technicality involving a pharmacy network mismatch. A third attempt, filed in June for a compassionate use pathway through the drug manufacturer, was denied because Anthony's adjusted gross income of $42,800 was $1,100 above the qualifying threshold for the manufacturer's free drug program. 3 denials in 97 days. The estimated 2-year cost of the medications, out of pocket, was $114,000. Anthony did not have $114,000. Anthony did not have $114 in his checking account on the morning of Dominic's transplant. Anthony had done what fathers like Anthony do. He had taken a second job. He was already working 48 hours a week at the restaurant. He picked up overnight shifts, stocking shelves at a warehouse in North Olmsted. He slept in 20-minute stretches on a vinyl recliner beside Dominic's hospital bed. He sold Maria's engagement ring, which he had been keeping in a velvet box in the top drawer of his dresser since her funeral, for $1,400. He sold his late father-in-law's Cadillac. He sold his own work truck and bought a '96 Chevy Lumina for $600 less. He took out a $4,000 loan from his father against a policy the firefighter pension had given Vincent on Maria's late mother. He refinanced the mortgage on the small house on West 130th Street, where Maria had once painted the kitchen yellow, and he pulled out $11,000. And in 7 months, he had raised $31,000. He needed $83,000 more. Dominic's first month of anti-rejection medications, post-transplant, began on October 22nd, 19 days after Family Feud. Without the medications, Dr. Menon had told him, eyes down at his own desk, the transplant would fail. But the real story hadn't even started yet. Because the person Anthony had been lying to was not his father or his sister or his best friend or his insurance company or himself. It was his 7-year-old son. Dominic had asked, on the Saturday before Anthony left for Atlanta, a question Anthony had been bracing for since the transplant. Dominic had been eating 3 bites of red Jell-O very slowly. He had set the spoon down. He had looked at his father. He had said, in the voice of a boy who has had 8.5 months to think about the question, "Dad, are we going to be okay with money?" Anthony had looked at his 7-year-old son, at Dominic's bald head, at the blue port taped to his chest, at the tube going into his left arm, at the small stuffed tiger Maria had given Dominic on his 4th birthday, which had been on the bed with him every single night for almost 3 years, and Anthony had told his son the first direct lie he had ever told him. "We're fine, buddy. Daddy's got it figured out. You just focus on getting better." Dominic had nodded. Dominic had picked up the spoon. Dominic had eaten the rest of the Jell-O very slowly, and Anthony had walked out of the hospital room, walked into the family bathroom at the end of the hall, closed the door, sat down on the tile floor, and cried for 14 minutes without making a sound, because the walls were too thin and his son could hear everything. What Anthony did not know was that Dominic had not believed him. Dominic was 7 years old, and he had been living in hospitals for almost a year. He had overheard things. He had watched his father lose 22 pounds. He had noticed that his father had stopped eating the sandwiches Gianna brought. He had noticed that his father now wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, and the collars had become thin. And Dominic had started writing something, on nights when he could not sleep, on the back of the small whiteboard the nurses had given him to play tic-tac-toe with his siblings on the FaceTime calls. He had written it in blue dry erase marker in the careful printing of a second grader. He had written it 3 days before his father left for Atlanta. He had kept it hidden under his pillow when the nurses were in the room and had slid it back out when they left. Steve would later call what happened with that whiteboard the most important moment of his career. On the morning of October 3, 2024, Anthony Russo walked onto the Family Feud stage on 4 hours of total sleep, with $31,000 saved and $83,000 still to raise, and with a 7-year-old son 11 days into the most dangerous 30 days of his life, back in a hospital 680 miles away. Steve greeted the families. The regular game began. The Russos took the first round on a question about things a single father forgets to do. The Johansons took the second. The Russos took the third on a question about what you would tell your younger self. And Anthony's answer, "She's worth every second," landed at the top of the board, because 37% of the survey had said a variation of the same thing. Steve had paused for a half-second on that answer. He had not asked Anthony what it meant. He had moved on. Fast money. Vincent took the first chair. 64 years old, his hands shaking, his mustache quivering, Vincent Russo scored 142 points. The audience cheered. Anthony sat down in the second chair. The headphones were too big. Steve walked him through the first question. Name something a child asks a parent that breaks their heart. Anthony said, "Are we going to be okay?" The board lit up. 43 points. That was when the phone started ringing. Anthony, concentrating on Steve's face, did not hear it. The phone was set to silent, but the override had been activated for the PICU number, and the phone was vibrating in the back pocket of his jeans, with a long pattern, 3 short buzzes and a pause. First ring. Steve had already asked the second question. Anthony answered. 19 points. Second ring. Anthony's hand went involuntarily to his back pocket. He pulled the phone halfway out without looking at it. He silenced the screen with his thumb and pushed it back into his pocket. He did not look at the caller. Third ring. The producer in the control booth, a 12-year Family Feud veteran named Kennedy Hayes, had glanced at the backup monitor on her desk that showed the audio feed from Anthony's mic pack. The mic pack registered the vibration as a low hum. Kennedy had been with the show long enough to know the sound. She pulled up the phone's incoming call on the backup channel. She saw the number. Her stomach dropped. She had been briefed that morning. Every producer on the shoot had been briefed. Anthony Russo had a son in pediatric ICU post-transplant. The PICU number was on a short list of numbers that, if they came in, the show would stop for. Kennedy stood up. She ran. Fourth ring. Kennedy hit the side curtain at a dead sprint. The production assistants in the wings moved out of her way. She broke through the curtain onto the edge of the stage and waved across the studio. Steve Harvey, in the middle of reading the fourth fast money question, saw her. He did not finish the sentence. Kennedy mouthed 2 words, slowly, so Steve could read her lips. His son. Steve Harvey turned his head slowly toward Anthony. He looked at the phone-shaped bulge in the back pocket of Anthony's jeans. He looked at Anthony's face. Anthony, still focused on the headphones, had not heard the phone. Anthony had not seen Kennedy. Steve walked off the host mark. He crossed the stage in 4 long strides. He reached Anthony at the fast money chair. He put his hand gently on Anthony's shoulder. Anthony looked up. Steve did not speak into his microphone. He spoke directly to Anthony, off mic, in a voice the front row of the audience later said they heard as the softest voice they had ever heard a host use. "Brother, I need that phone in your back pocket, right now." Anthony's face went white. He pulled the phone out. He looked at the screen. His hand started shaking. He could not move his thumb to the answer button. Steve Harvey took the phone out of Anthony's hand. He answered it himself. "This is Steve Harvey. Who am I speaking to?" The audience could not hear the voice on the other end. The microphones could not pick it up. The studio fell completely silent. Steve listened for 9 seconds. His face did not move. Then he said, "Ma'am, I am putting this on speaker. Anthony Russo is right beside me. His whole family is here. Say it to him." He pressed the speaker button. He held the phone to Anthony's ear and tilted it slightly so the microphone on his own lapel could pick up the voice. The voice that came out was a woman's voice. It was exhausted. It was kind. It was a nurse named Linda at the PICU at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. "Anthony, it's Linda. Dominic is asking for you." Anthony tried to speak. He could not. Steve put one arm around Anthony's shoulders. "Anthony, he had a rough hour. His fever went up. Dr. Menon got it under control. He is stable right now. But Anthony, Dominic asked us to call you because he wanted to tell you something. He said he was worried he would not get to tell you later. He asked me to say it to you exactly the way he said it. He has the whiteboard in his hands. Is it okay if I read it?" Anthony nodded. He could not speak. Steve said, into the phone, "Go ahead, Linda." Linda's voice was shaking now, too. He wrote, and he wanted me to read it exactly. "Daddy, I know we aren't fine with money. I heard you in the bathroom. It's okay. I'm not scared. I just want you to stop being scared too. I love you, Dominic." The studio fell silent a second time. Anthony Russo dropped to his knees on the Family Feud stage. He did not make a sound. His shoulders shook. The fast money chair was empty behind him. Vincent Russo, 64 years old, retired firefighter, walked forward from the contestant row. Vincent walked across the stage. He knelt down next to his son. He put both of his old hands on Anthony's back. He did not speak. He simply held his son on the floor of a television stage, the way his son was no longer able to hold himself. Steve Harvey sat down on the stage floor, too. Steve took the phone. He said, "Linda, is Dominic awake right now?" "Yes, Mr. Harvey." "Can I speak to him, ma'am?" There was a rustle on the other end of the line. A small voice came on the phone. 7 years old, thin, tired. "Hello? Dominic, my name is Steve Harvey. Your daddy is right here with me. He loves you more than anything in this world. I want to tell you something, son. You just wrote a note that is going to change your daddy's whole life. And a lot of other daddies' lives, too. Are you there?" "Yes, Mr. Steve." "Dominic, I am going to make sure your daddy has every single thing he needs to take care of you. Every medicine, every doctor, every single thing. You do not worry about money one more day. You hear me? You worry about one thing. You worry about getting better. That is your only job. And your daddy is going to hold the whiteboard up to the camera for me in a minute. I want to see what you wrote. Is that okay? Yes, Mr. Steve. Dominic, I want to ask you one thing, son. Yes, Mr. Steve. Do you have a stuffed animal with you right now? Yeah, it's a tiger. My mom gave it to me. What's his name, Dominic? His name is Rocco. My mom named him before she died. Steve Harvey closed his eyes. Rocco. That is a very good name for a tiger, son. I want you to hold Rocco real tight tonight. Your daddy is flying home as soon as this show is over. And tomorrow, he is going to sleep in his own bed for the first time in 2 months. You and me are going to make sure of that together, okay? Okay, Mr. Steve. Put Linda back on, son. There was a small sound, a child handing a phone to an adult. Linda came back on. Steve said, Linda, I have your extension now. I am going to call you back in 30 minutes. I need you to tell Dr. Menon to stand by. I am going to be making some arrangements. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Steve hung up. He looked at Anthony, still on the stage floor, Vincent's hands on his back. Steve said quietly, Brother, I need you to stand up. One more thing to do today. Anthony stood up. Steve turned to the camera. Everybody watching at home, let me tell you something. 30 years ago, I was living in a 1976 Ford Tempo. I had 2 daughters at the time. My older daughter was 7. I could not take care of her. She was with her mother because I could not feed her. And I sat in that car one night in a gas station in Cleveland, Ohio. In this man's hometown. In Cleveland. And I prayed a prayer I have prayed every day since. I said, Lord, I promise you that if you ever get me out of this car, I will not let another father sit alone with a sick child and a pile of denial letters and a phone in his back pocket he is afraid to answer. God got me out, and I have been waiting 30 years to keep that promise. Steve pulled out his own phone. But Steve wasn't done. He called Dr. Rakesh Menon at Rainbow Babies, on speaker, on live tape. Dr. Menon, Steve Harvey, I am with Anthony Russo. I just read the denial letters. I am paying every single dollar of the anti-rejection medication protocol for the full 2 years post-transplant. And Dr. Menon, whatever follow-up Dominic needs, for as long as he needs it, I am paying personally. I will wire funds this afternoon. Mr. Harvey, I can start him on the full protocol on the 22nd. Start him on the 22nd. But Steve wasn't done. He called the head of the Cleveland Clinic Children's Foundation. He arranged for Anthony and his 3 children to stay in the foundation's Ronald McDonald House apartment, walking distance from Rainbow Babies, fully paid, for the first 100 days post-transplant. He added a 2nd bedroom for Gianna. But Steve wasn't done. He called Anthony's landlord. He prepaid Anthony's rent for the next 18 months. He called Anthony's employer at the restaurant. He asked, and received, a guarantee that Anthony's job would be waiting for him for as long as he needed. But Steve wasn't done. He turned back to the studio. He said, Both families win today. I am paying the Johansson family $20,000 and the Russo family $20,000. Out of my own pocket. The Fast Money Board does not write the ending of this story. And Anthony, you are not flying commercial home. My private plane takes off in 90 minutes. You will be at Dominic's bedside by 3:30 this afternoon. Anthony made a sound that was not a word. Birgit Johansson, the hospice social worker from Minneapolis, walked across the stage. She did not speak. She hugged Anthony for a long time. Then she reached into her purse, and she pulled out a small, laminated card. It was a photograph of a little boy about Dominic's age. She handed it to Anthony. She said quietly, My son Henrik. He was 7 when we lost him, 14 years ago. You tell Dominic that I am praying for him tonight, and every night, for as long as he needs it." Anthony held the card in his hand, and he could not let go of it. He would later have it framed and hang it on the wall of Dominic's bedroom. The clip from the Atlanta studio went up on the Family Feud YouTube channel 72 hours later. Within 5 days, it had been viewed 412 million times across all platforms. The hashtag #AnswerThePhone trended #1 worldwide for 6 straight days. Good Morning America ran the footage in full. CNN ran a panel. A cardiac nurse in Michigan watched the clip on her lunch break and answered a call from her estranged father that same afternoon. A father in Dallas, who had not spoken to his own son in 9 years, drove 11 hours overnight. The U.S. Surgeon General released a statement 3 weeks later on the importance of parents staying reachable to their children during critical medical events. In March 2025, Congress passed the Russo-Menon Continuity of Care Act, which required insurers to cover FDA-approved pediatric post-transplant medications for the full duration of a treating oncologist's recommended protocol, regardless of experimental combination flags. It was the fastest pediatric transplant coverage reform in modern American history. Dr. Menon began Dominic's anti-rejection protocol on October 22, 2024, as promised. Day 30 post-transplant came. Dominic's marrow began producing its own healthy cells. Day 60. Day 90. On February 14, 2025, exactly 1 year to the day after the diagnosis, Dominic's scan came back clean. The transplant had worked. The doctors told Anthony that Dominic would need monitoring for the rest of his life, but that the prognosis at this point was excellent. Dominic turned 8 years old on April 19, 2025. Steve Harvey sent him a stuffed tiger the size of a full-grown dog, with a small tag sewn into the left paw that said, "For Rocco's little brother. Love, Mr. Steve." Steve Harvey launched the Answer the Phone Foundation on November 19, 2024, named after the phone call that had interrupted a Family Feud taping. The foundation's mission was simple. Every single parent of a child in active critical care in the United States would have 3 things guaranteed. No questions asked. Housing within walking distance of the hospital, living expenses for the duration of treatment, and full coverage of any FDA-approved therapy denied by insurance. In its first year, the foundation funded 3,184 families. By year 2, the number had grown to more than 10,000. Steve funded the first $22 million himself. In a 60 Minutes interview that aired on December 14, 2025, Steve Harvey was asked what he thought about when he remembered the morning a phone rang 4 times in a contestant's back pocket. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I think about a 7-year-old boy in a hospital bed in Cleveland who wrote 3 sentences on a whiteboard that every single parent in America needed to read. I know we aren't fine. It's okay. Stop being scared." I think those are the 3 sentences every child of a struggling parent is trying to say, and I think most of us are too tired to let them say it. I hope that phone call and that whiteboard reminded a few people to let their kids say it. On October 3, 2025, exactly 1 year to the day after the taping, Anthony Russo stood on the main stage at the Answer the Phone Foundation's first annual gala in Atlanta. He was wearing the same charcoal button-down his sister had bought him for the taping. He had gained back 22 pounds. His 3 children were with him. Dominic, 8 years old, with a full head of brown hair and a new set of front teeth, stood on a step stool so he could reach the microphone. He held Rocco the tiger in his left hand. In his right hand, he held the small, white, dry erase whiteboard he had written on 11 months and 23 days earlier. He had kept it. He had not erased it. The 3 sentences were still there, faded now, in the blue ink of a 7-year-old second grader. He held the whiteboard up to the audience. He did not read it out loud. He did not have to. The entire auditorium stood up. Steve Harvey, in the front row, wept openly and did not try to hide it. Somewhere tonight, in a hospital room, on a quiet floor of a quiet building, in a quiet city you have never thought about, a 7-year-old is writing 3 sentences on a whiteboard for a father who is too tired to hear him. And somewhere in the building next door, a father is sitting in a chair, ignoring a phone that is ringing in his back pocket, because he is too afraid to answer it. This is why it matters. The phone calls we are afraid to answer are almost always the ones we will spend the rest of our lives grateful we did. And the 3 sentences our children write for us, on whiteboards we throw away, are almost always the most important 3 sentences anyone will ever say to us. Before you close this video, do one thing. If there is a phone call you have been avoiding, go to your phone right now. Not in a minute, right now. Answer it if it is ringing. Return it if it is waiting. Make it if you have been putting it off. If it is your child, start with the words, "I am listening." If it is your parent, start with, "I am here." Then come back to this video and write in the comments the first name of the person on the other end. Just the first name. I read as many as I can. Every name in that comment section is a phone somebody finally stopped ignoring. Hit subscribe before you go, because tomorrow's stage is already being set.